My knuckles are white, gripping the steering wheel. It's stupid hot for September, the kind of heat that sticks to you, suffocating, the kind that reminds me of my life, really. It always felt like I was choking on something, some unspoken expectation, some invisible pressure. I pull up to the familiar house, the manicured lawn screaming Stepford perfection. It hasn't changed in all these years. Neither has what I feel when I see it. A hollow ache, a ghost of a childhood I never really had. I'm 33, 30 years old. I've built my life with my own two hands, calloused and scarred. I run a crew, oversee construction sites that stretch across the city skyline. I've earned every goddamn thing I have, and it still doesn't feel like enough. Because here, at this house, I'm still that kid. The one who always came second. Growing up in the Carter household was like living in a reality show where I was the perpetually eliminated contestant. My sister, Amy, could burp the alphabet backwards and get a parade thrown in her honor. Me? I could rebuild a car engine blindfolded, and it would barely warrant a shrug. Amy was their sun, their moon, their freaking stars. Our house was a goddamn shrine to her achievements. Every wall, every shelf, plastered with her trophies, certificates, and photos. Ballet recitals, spelling bees, piano concerts, you name it, it was framed and worshipped. Me? I got one photo, tucked away in a dusty album that probably hadn't seen the light of day since the Berlin Wall came down. My high school graduation picture. Small, insignificant, barely visible. I wasn't some delinquent kid. I played football, wrestled. I wasn't a star, but I busted my ass. I kept my grades up, worked part-time. I stayed out of trouble. But in their eyes, it was just expected. The bare minimum. No applause, no congratulations, just a nod, maybe a grunt. I started lifting weights in sophomore year, partly for football, sure, but mostly because I needed somewhere to channel the rage, the constant, simmering resentment. The garage became my escape. While Amy was getting private tutoring and fancy dance lessons, I was pumping iron with rusty weights I bought with my own goddamn money. Dad never once offered to spot me. He was too busy filming Amy's dance routines, or building sets for her school plays, the wrestling matches. Jesus, the wrestling matches. I can count on one hand the number of times they actually showed up. Every single time, there was some bullshit excuse. Amy had a recital. Amy had a competition. Amy needed help with her homework. My senior year, I won the state championship. You know where they were? Amy had an audition for some summer program she ended up dropping out of after a week. By 16, I was working construction during summer breaks. Not because we needed the money. Dad had some cushy office job. Mom sold real estate. I worked because I couldn't stand being home. The guys on the site became my real family. They taught me everything. How to read blueprints, how to operate heavy machinery, how to spot a scammer a mile away. More importantly, they taught me what it meant to have someone's back, something my own parents never quite grasped. I moved out the day after graduation, got a full-time job with the construction company I'd been working for, rented a tiny studio apartment. My parents barely noticed. They were too busy planning Amy's Sweet 16, which probably cost more than my first year's rent. The next few years were a grind. I clawed my way up from the bottom, learning everything I could. Laborer, carpenter's assistant, carpenter, lead carpenter. By 25, I was running my own crew. The guys respected me because they knew I'd been in their shoes. I wasn't some college kid with a clipboard. I was in the trenches with them, getting dirty, busting my ass. Meanwhile, Amy went off to some expensive private college. Guess who paid for that? She changed her major 3 times, finally settled on something vague and useless. Every time she came home, it was like the goddamn queen was visiting. Mom cooked elaborate meals. Dad cleared his schedule. Me? I got a text on my birthday, if they remembered. But here's the thing, it made me stronger. Every ignored achievement, Every missed match, every time they chose her over me, it fueled the fire. I turned that anger into muscle, into focus, into the relentless drive to succeed in spite of them. Not because of them. By the time the hammer fell, by the time my body decided to betray me, I was benching 3 plates for reps, deadlifting over 500 pounds, and running crews that finished projects ahead of schedule and under budget. I had finally started to feel like I had my shit together. I walk up the driveway, the perfectly trimmed hedges mocking me. I take a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. Time to face the music. Time to ask the people who are supposed to love me, the people who are supposed to have my back, to actually give a damn. I was 28. 20 fucking 8. I was crushing it at work, hitting personal records in the gym, finally starting to believe I might actually have a future. I'd worked my way up to site supervisor at one of the biggest construction companies in the area. I had my own apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I was even thinking about starting my own business down the line. Then life decided to remind me that it's a twisted joke. It started with this weird pain in my chest. Not heartburn, not a pulled muscle. This was different. A dull ache, deep inside, like something was slowly squeezing the air out of my lungs. At first, I brushed it off. You work construction long enough. Random aches and pains become background noise. Plus, I was that typical meathead, convinced I was invincible. Stupid. Looking back, I was so goddamn stupid. The real wake-up call came during a deadlift session. I was going for a new PR, 525. Everything felt solid during warm-ups, but as soon as I started pulling that weight, it felt like someone had wrapped a steel band around my chest and was tightening it with every breath. I had to bail on the lift. Me, the guy who once finished a wrestling match with a dislocated shoulder. I had to drop the bar and sit down because I couldn't breathe. Mark, my buddy from the crew, the same guy who taught me everything I know about concrete work, practically dragged my stubborn ass to the ER. I thought it was just going to be some pulled muscle, maybe a pinched nerve. Nope. After what felt like a million tests and scans, the doctor came in with that look on his face. You know the one. The professional mask, barely concealing the impending doom. Turns out I had a tumor pressing against my lung. Not the kind they can just cut out and be done with it either. We were talking major surgery, followed by treatments that sounded like they came straight out of a science fiction movie. The kind of shit that makes you realize all those hours in the gym, all that protein powder and creatine, don't mean jack when your own body decides to turn against you. But here's the real kicker, the punchline to this cosmic joke, the cost. Remember how I mentioned I was doing well at work? Yeah, well, construction companies aren't exactly known for their amazing benefits packages, no health insurance, and being the young, invincible dumbass I was, I hadn't bothered getting private coverage. Why waste money on insurance when I could spend it on supplements and new lifting gear, right? God, I was so fucking stupid. The numbers the hospital threw at me might as well have been in Monopoly money. Surgery alone was going to cost more than I made in 2 years. Then add in all the treatments, medications with names I couldn't even pronounce, follow-up care. We're talking enough money to buy a house in some states. And they wanted it up front, or at least proof I could pay. Welcome to American healthcare. I tried everything. Called every insurance company, but pre-existing conditions were still a bitch back then. Looked into medical trials, but none were accepting new patients. Even checked out those medical tourism websites, the ones about getting treatment in Mexico or India. But the doctor shot that down real quick, said I needed to start treatment like yesterday. My crew, man, those guys were amazing. Mark started a GoFundMe right away. The other guys were offering to donate vacation days, sick leave, whatever they could. Even the old-timer who'd been busting my balls since day one about being too pretty for construction because I actually wore sunscreen, skin cancer. ironically, came by with an envelope full of cash. He'd been saving for a new Harley, but it wasn't enough. Not even close. The numbers were just too big. We're talking 6 figures here, and time wasn't on my side. Every day I waited. This thing inside me was growing, making it harder to breathe, harder to work, harder to even get through a normal day without feeling like I was drowning on dry land. I lost 15 pounds in the first month, just from stress and not being able to eat right. Had to drop down to light duty at work because I couldn't handle the heavy lifting anymore. Every breath felt like I was trying to suck air through a coffee stirrer. Nights were the worst, lying there in the dark, feeling this thing inside me, wondering if each breath might be the one where my lung finally gives out. That's when I made the hardest decision of my life. After years of being the independent one, the one who never needed help, the one who'd built everything from scratch, I had to swallow my pride and go ask my parents for help. They weren't rich, but they had savings, good credit, a paid-off house. Plus, they were my parents. The people who are supposed to have your back when shit hits the fan. I park the car, the engine ticking as it cools. I can feel the tumor, a dull ache behind my ribs. It's a constant reminder of what's at stake. I take another deep breath and get out of the car. Time to face the music. It was a Tuesday evening when I drove to my parents' house. I remember it clearly because I'd just gotten my latest test results that morning, and the doctor was pushing hard for us to schedule the surgery ASAP. I'd lost another 10 pounds that month. My work jeans were hanging off me like I was some teenager trying to look cool. The chest pain was getting worse, to the point where I had to take breaks walking up a single flight of stairs. Their house looked exactly the same as it always had. Real estate prices in their neighborhood had doubled since they bought the place. They were sitting on at least $500,000 in equity alone. I sat down in the chair across from them, trying to ignore how my chest felt like it was in a vice grip. I started explaining everything: the diagnosis, the timeline, the costs. I showed them all the paperwork from the hospital, the treatment plans, everything. I even had a letter from my doctor explaining how urgent this was. My hands were shaking the whole time. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, asking them for help. You know what they did while I was laying all this out? Mom kept glancing at her phone, like she was waiting for a more important call. Dad just sat there with his arms crossed, that same look on his face he used to get when I'd tell him about my wrestling matches, like he was tolerating an annoying sales pitch. When I finally finished talking, there was this long silence, the kind that makes your skin crawl. Then Mom and Dad did this thing they always did, this little look between them, like they were having a whole conversation without words. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and dropped the bomb. "We can't help you with that, Jake. We've already committed our savings to Amy's wedding." I thought I'd misheard him at first, like maybe the tumor had spread to my brain or something. But nope. He just sat there looking at me like he'd told me they couldn't lend me $20 for gas. The wedding? I remember my voice cracking, not from emotion, from straight-up disbelief. "You're choosing a party over my life?" Mom jumped in then, all smooth and calm, like she was explaining something to a child. "It's not just a party, Jake. This is Amy's special day. We've already put down non-refundable deposits. The venue alone was $30,000. $30,000 for a venue. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there, literally dying, needing surgery that could save my life, and they're worried about their precious Amy's Instagram perfect wedding. I could die without this surgery," I said, slow and deliberate, making sure they understood exactly what they were doing. "This isn't me asking for help buying a car or starting a business. This is life or death." Dad actually had the balls to shrug, like he was dismissing a waiter who'd brought him the wrong appetizer. "You've always been resourceful, Jake. You'll figure something out. This is Amy's time. We can't let her down." That's when it hit me. All those years of being the forgotten son, all those missed events, all those times they chose her over me. It wasn't just them being busy or distracted. They genuinely valued her happiness over my life. Their son could literally die, and they were more concerned about their daughter having the perfect wedding photos. I got up to leave, my legs barely holding me up. Mom actually had the nerve to say, "Don't be dramatic, Jake. There must be some payment plan you can work out with the hospital." Payment plan. Like I was buying a dishwasher or something. The last thing I remember before walking out was looking at that wall of Amy's photos. All those smiling faces, all that money spent making sure their precious daughter had everything perfect. And there I was, their son, walking out of their house, knowing I meant less to them than a goddamn party. The air is thick, heavy with the scent of pine and regret. I can see them through the window, Dad pacing, Mom clutching a tissue. The anger is a familiar burn, a low simmer that threatens to boil over. I clench my fists, forcing myself to breathe. I can't let them see me like this. Weak, desperate. I have to be strong. For myself. That was the last time I spoke to them for almost 5 years. The next few months after my parents chose a wedding over their son's life were pure hell. Not the metaphorical kind. I'm talking actual, physical, wondering if you'll wake up tomorrow kind of hell. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're there, you've got nothing left to lose. And sometimes, that's exactly what you need to find out who you really are. The first thing I did after leaving their house was drive straight to work. It was already dark, but I knew Mark would still be there, finishing paperwork. The guy's been running the night crew for 15 years. I found him in the site office, doing what he always does, cursing at Excel spreadsheets and drinking coffee that could strip paint. I told him everything. Not gonna lie, I broke down halfway through. Here I am, 6'2", 220 pounds. Well, more like 190 by then, crying like a baby in a construction trailer. You know what Mark did? He didn't say a word, just got up, locked the office door, then picked up his phone and started making calls. By midnight, we had a plan. Not a good one, but when you're drowning, you don't complain about the quality of the rope. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital payment negotiations, loan applications, and picking up every extra shift I could physically handle. The crew, my real family, stepped up in ways I still can't talk about without getting choked up. These guys, most of them living paycheck to paycheck themselves, somehow scraped together almost $15,000 for my treatment fund. Miguel, our master carpenter, who'd been sending half his paycheck to family in Mexico, handed me an envelope with $2,000 in cash. Said his kids could wait another year for their PlayStation. Big Pete, who everyone thought was just a stereotypical musclehead concrete specialist, turned out to be a whiz at organizing fundraisers. The man got the local gym to host a bench press competition, convinced local businesses to donate prizes, raised another $8,000 in one weekend. But it still wasn't enough. Not even close. The surgery alone was going to cost over $80,000, and that's before adding in all the other treatments. So I did what I had to do. Sold my truck, the one I'd spent 2 years restoring on weekends. Sold my custom gaming PC. Sold every piece of gym equipment I owned. Even sold my grandfather's watch, the only thing he'd ever left me. That one hurt the most. Meanwhile, I was still trying to work as much as possible, even though by this point I could barely make it through a 4-hour shift without feeling like I was breathing through a straw. The tumor was growing, pressing harder against my lung. Every breath felt like trying to inflate a balloon inside a box that's too small. I lost another 15 pounds. My work boots stopped fitting because my feet were swelling from the fluid retention. The worst part? Seeing Amy's wedding preparations all over social media. My parents were posting constant updates about venue tastings, flower arrangements, dress fittings. Each post was like a knife in the gut. The flower budget alone could have covered one of my chemotherapy sessions. The designer dress they bought her probably cost enough to pay for my first round of treatment. Then came the wedding invitations. Well, not to me, obviously. I heard about them from a cousin who still talked to me. Apparently, they were these elaborate things with gold foil and custom calligraphy. Cost like $15 per piece. They ordered 200 of them. Do the math on that one. $3,000 on paper that most people would throw away. While their son was working security shifts at a warehouse between his regular job, barely able to breathe. But here's where the story takes a turn you might not expect. Remember that GoFundMe that Mark started? It caught the attention of one of our suppliers, a big commercial construction materials company. Their CEO had lost his brother to the same type of cancer I had. The guy calls me personally one morning, says he wants to help. Next thing I know, they're offering to cover 40% of my medical costs through their corporate charitable foundation. That was the break I needed. Between that, the loans I'd taken out, everything I'd sold, and what the crew had raised, I finally had enough to schedule the surgery. Had to drain my 400 wunk, max out 3 credit cards, and sign up for a payment plan that would take years to pay off. But I was going to live. The surgery was scheduled for 3 days before Amy's wedding. Not that they knew or cared. They were too busy with final dress fittings and rehearsal dinners. I walk towards the door. The doorbell feels heavy in my hand. I push it. The sound echoes inside. I went into that operating room alone. Well, not really alone. Mark took the day off to drive me there. Miguel's wife made me a care package of homemade tamales for after the surgery. Big Pete organized the crew to cover all my shifts for the next month. You want to know what true family is? It's not the people who share your DNA. It's the guys who work overtime so you can make rent while you're recovering. It's the rough-handed carpenter who sits in a hospital waiting room for 12 hours straight, just so you don't wake up alone. It's the crew that passes around a hard hat, collecting dollars and quarters, because every bit helps. I made it through the surgery, spent 2 weeks in the hospital, another month recovering at home. The crew took turns checking on me, bringing food, helping with basic stuff I couldn't do while I was healing. Not once did my phone ring with a call from my parents or Amy. They were probably too busy posting wedding photos on Instagram. Recovery was a bitch. Anyone who's been through major surgery knows what I'm talking about. That feeling where even breathing feels like you're learning a new skill. But here's the thing about hitting bottom. Once you start climbing back up, you realize just how strong you really are. And man, did I climb. The first few months were rough. I lost most of my muscle mass. Couldn't lift more than a gallon of milk without feeling like my chest was going to explode. But you know what? Every morning, I woke up breathing was a middle finger to the people who'd left me for dead. I started small, walking to the mailbox, then around the block, then actual cardio. Rebuilt myself one painful step at a time. Mark and the crew kept me on light duty, mostly supervising and doing paperwork. Wasn't much, but it kept me in the game. Started learning the business side of construction, contracts, bidding, project management. Turns out, when you can't lift heavy anymore, your brain starts working overtime. Who knew? About a year after the surgery, I got an unexpected call from that CEO who'd helped with my medical bills. The guy wanted to meet for coffee. I figured he was just checking up on his investment, making sure I hadn't died or whatever. Nope. Turns out, he'd been watching how I handled everything. The recovery, the work ethic, the crew management. Offered me a position as a project manager for their commercial division. Better pay, full benefits finally, and most importantly, a chance to learn how the big boys play. I took that opportunity and ran with it like I was being chased. Spent the next few years absorbing everything I could about commercial construction. Nights, weekends, didn't matter. While Amy was posting about her perfect suburban life and my parents were bragging about their country club membership, I was building something real. Started small at first, took some of the smaller projects nobody else wanted. You know, the ones where the margins are tight and you've got to get creative. Learned every trick in the book about maximizing efficiency without cutting corners. My crews loved me because I'd actually been in their boots, known what it's like to bust your ass in 100-degree heat for minimum wage. By year 3, I was handling multi-million-dollar projects. Remember that tumor that nearly killed me? I used that experience to specialize in medical facility construction. Turns out, hospitals love working with someone who understands their world from both sides. Started making connections, building relationships, the kind of networking you can't fake because it comes from shared experience. Then I got the project that changed everything, a $50 million medical center renovation, the biggest job I'd ever managed. Spent 6 months planning it down to the smallest detail. The project was a massive success. Came in under budget and ahead of schedule. Got written up in some industry magazines, won a few awards. Suddenly, I wasn't just some construction guy anymore. I was an innovative voice in medical facility design or some shit like that. Started getting calls from other healthcare systems wanting to work with us. Meanwhile, life at home got better too. Met Sarah at a supplier conference. She runs a commercial electrical contracting company. First woman I'd ever met who could talk about load-bearing calculations and still make me laugh so hard. My chest hurt in a good way this time. Got married last year? Small ceremony, just close friends and my real family, the crew. Everything was going great. The house, the job, Sarah. It was all coming together. Like some cosmic balance, maybe. Then, about 6 months ago, I started hearing rumors through the industry grapevine. Remember that fancy country club my parents were so proud of belonging to? Turns out, Dad had gotten involved in some real estate investment scheme with some other members. You know the type, promise huge returns, minimal risk, all that bullshit. Only this time, it wasn't just their membership dues they'd invested. They'd mortgaged their house, cashed out their retirement accounts. The whole 9 yards. The first sign something was wrong came when they suddenly started selling off their toys. Dad's precious golf club membership, gone. Mom's brand new luxury SUV, traded in for a used Honda. Their regular spots at all the charity galas and social events, mysteriously empty. But the real shit didn't hit the fan until last month. Got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Almost didn't answer it. I was in the middle of reviewing bids for a new project. Wish I'd let it go to voicemail. It was my mother's voice, sounding small and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. Jake, we need to talk. It's important. The door swings open. Mom stands there, her face etched with worry. Dad is right behind her, looking older, smaller than I remember. That phone call from my mother. Turns out, their small financial trouble was more like the Titanic after meeting that iceberg. The investment scheme Dad got involved with wasn't just bad, it was catastrophically, criminally bad. Like FBI investigating the whole thing bad. They'd sunk everything they had into it. Their retirement savings, their home equity, even took out additional loans using their house as collateral. All gone! But here's where it gets interesting. Their first move wasn't to call their precious Amy, their golden child, their perfect daughter, the one they'd chosen over my literal survival. Nope. They called me. The forgotten son, the one they'd left to rot when he needed them the most. Because Amy, she'd already turned them down. Hard. See, about a week before they called me, they'd shown up at Amy's McMansion in her fancy gated community. The same house they'd helped her and her lawyer husband buy with a massive down payment, while I was still paying off my medical bills, by the way. They'd packed up some suitcases, thinking they could just move in with their precious daughter until things sorted themselves out. Want to know what their perfect princess did? Had her husband answer the door. This guy, this corporate lawyer who'd spent the last 5 years kissing their asses at every family gathering, looks them dead in the eye and says, "We can't risk having your financial problems affect our children's future." Then he hands them a business card for a bankruptcy attorney and closes the door in their faces. While Amy watched from the window, the same daughter they'd spent hundreds of thousands on, private school, dance lessons, college, that ridiculous wedding, wouldn't even let them sleep on her couch. The same parents who'd chosen her wedding over their son's life were now standing on her doorstep with nowhere to go, and she treated them like door-to-door salesmen. Mom told me all this through tears when she finally broke down and called me, not because she felt bad about what they'd done to me. No! She was just desperate. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage. The bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. Dad's precious Mercedes had already been repossessed. All their friends from the country club had suddenly stopped returning their calls. "We don't know what to do, Jake," she sobbed into the phone. "We've tried everything. We need help." I sat there in my office, my nice big corner office with a view of the city, listening to her cry. The same woman who'd sat there stone-faced when I told her I might die without surgery was now breaking down because they might lose their house. "How much do you need?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral, professional, like I was talking to a subcontractor who'd screwed up a bid. "50,000, she whispered, "just to catch up on the mortgage and hold off the foreclosure. We can figure out the rest later." $50,000. The exact amount they'd spent on Amy's wedding photographer and videographer. I remember seeing the photos. They'd hired some famous Instagram guy who usually did celebrity weddings. Got a whole team of videographers too, with drones and everything. Real artistic. "What does Amy say about all this?" I asked, even though I already knew. There was a long pause. She says they're investing in their children's future, that they can't risk their financial stability. "But Jake, we're your parents. We raised you." I cut her off. "Like you raised me when I needed surgery? When I was literally fighting for my life?" "That was different," she snapped, sudden anger replacing the tears. "That was an emergency. We had commitments. An emergency? I could have died, Mom." "Died? But you had commitments to Amy's wedding. And now you're calling me because she won't help you." That's when Dad got on the phone, still trying to sound authoritative, like he had any power left in this situation. "Now listen here, son. What's past is past. We need to think about the future, about family. There was that word again. The same one they'd thrown around when they needed something but conveniently forgot when I was the one in need. "Tell me something, Dad," I said, leaning back in my chair. "When Amy turned you away, when her husband handed you that bankruptcy attorney's card, did it hurt? Did it feel like someone had ripped your heart out? Like the person you'd given everything to just didn't care if you lived or died?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "What do you want, Jake?" Mom asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" I look at them, really look at them. For the first time in years, the carefully constructed facade of suburban perfection has crumbled, revealing the desperation underneath. "I want you to understand," I say. "I want you to understand what it feels like to be alone, to be abandoned, to know that the people who are supposed to love you don't give a damn." The morning after that phone call from my parents, I had a lot to think about. Spent a few hours in my home gym, the one Sarah and I had built in our basement. Not really working out, just sitting there on my bench press, staring at myself in the mirror, looking at the scar on my chest from the surgery I'd had to fight for alone. The next day, I got a call from the bank handling my parents' mortgage. Turns out, I was still listed as the emergency contact. Amy had demanded to be removed from all their financial documents months ago. The bank representative was very professional, explaining they were preparing for foreclosure proceedings, asked if I was in a position to help resolve the situation. I told them I'd get back to them. Had some thinking to do first. That Saturday, I drove down to my old construction site, the one where I'd started as a laborer, where Mark and the crew had saved my life. The place was different now. We were finishing up that $50 million medical center project. My project. Standing there in the morning sun, looking at this massive building that existed because I'd survived, I made my decision. Called my parents, told them to meet me at the site, told them to come at 7 a.m. sharp, when the day crew would be arriving. They showed up looking like hell. "Why are we here, Jake?" Mom asked, trying to sound authoritative, but her voice shaking. They looked out of place in their casual luxury clothes, surrounded by men and women in work gear who were actually producing something real. I turned to face them. "See this building? This whole medical center? It exists because I survived, not because of you. In spite of you, every person who gets treatment here, every life that gets saved in this building, it's because I made it without you." Dad started to say something, but I cut him off. "I brought you here because I want you to understand something. 5 years ago, I sat in your living room and begged for help. I needed $80,000 for surgery that would save my life. You chose Amy's wedding instead, a party that cost more than what I needed to survive. We've apologized for that," Mom interrupted, her voice small. "We were wrong. We know that now." "No," I said, my voice hard. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you need something from me now. There's a difference." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. "You need $50,000 to save your house. That's less than what you spent on Amy's wedding flowers. The daughter who won't even let you sleep on her couch. Now, are you going to help us or not?" Dad demanded, a flash of his old arrogance showing through. I looked at him for a long moment, then I turned to the crew. "My real family. Hey Mark, remember when I needed surgery? When everyone here pitched in to help save my life?" Mark walked over, wiping his hands on his vest. "Sure do, boss. Still got the hard hat we used to collect donations." I turned back to my parents. "These men who make a fraction of what you used to make, who have their own families to support, gave everything they could to help me live. They showed me what real family means. Then I did something that felt like lifting a 1,000-pound deadlift off my chest." I smiled. "The answer is no. I'm not giving you a cent. Not for the house. Not for anything. Ever." Mom started crying. Dad's face went red. "We're your parents. You can't just—" "I can," I cut him off. "And I am. You know what the difference is between you and Amy?" "Nothing." "You're exactly the same. You only care about people when they're useful to you. The moment they need something, you throw them away." I gestured to the medical center rising behind me. "I built something real here. Something that helps people. While you were throwing parties and playing golf, I was creating something that matters. And I did it without you. Where are we supposed to go?" Mom sobbed. "We'll be homeless." I shrugged. "You'll figure it out. You're resourceful. Isn't that what you told me when I was dying?" I started walking away, then turned back one last time. "Oh, and Dad, remember what you said about family helping family? You were right. Family does help family. You're just not my family anymore." I left them standing there in the dust of my construction site, surrounded by the men and women who'd shown me what real family means. I went up to my office and watched through the window as they got in their beat-up Honda and drove away. That was 2 months ago. They lost the house last week. Amy's still not taking their calls. Last I heard, they're living in some extended stay motel, trying to figure out what to do next. Their country club friends have all disappeared. Their golden child wants nothing to do with them. And me? I just signed a contract for another medical center project, bigger than the last one. The crew's still with me, every single one of them. Sarah's pregnant with our first kid. Life's good. Sometimes karma takes her time, but when she finally shows up, she makes sure to finish the job right. I unlock the door and push it open. "Mom? Dad?" The sound echoes in the silence of a house that's no longer haunted. At least, not by me. The air inside is stale, untouched by the vibrant energy of the construction site I'd left behind. It smells of dust and mothballs, the scent of a life slowly suffocating. I step inside, feeling the weight of their presence, their desperation hanging in the air like a humid fog. "Jake?" Mom's voice is tentative, weaker than I've ever heard it. They're in the living room, the same room where they delivered their death sentence years ago. Only now, the room itself seems to mirror their decline. The once pristine furniture is faded. The carefully arranged decor looks tired and worn. The only thing that hasn't changed is the wall of Amy's photos. They still stare down, a constant reminder of a love that was never fully mine. They look worse than I imagined. Mom's usually impeccable hair is pulled back in a messy bun, her face pale and drawn. Dark circles ring her eyes. Dad's lost weight, his expensive suit replaced by a wrinkled, ill-fitting shirt and slacks. The swagger, the self-assurance is gone, replaced by a haunted, defeated look. "What do you want, Jake?" Dad asks, his voice raspy. He tries to meet my eyes, but quickly looks away. "I don't sit. I want to keep this brief to get it over with. This isn't a reconciliation. It's a transaction, a final closing of a long overdue account. I wanted to see it," I say, my voice flat. I wanted to see what it looked like when the perfect life falls apart. Mom flinches, tears welling in her eyes. "That's cruel, Jake. We're your parents. You haven't earned that title," I say, my voice unwavering. Parents don't choose parties over their children's lives. They don't abandon them when they're fighting for every breath. Dad sighs, running a hand through his thinning hair. "We made mistakes, Jake. Terrible mistakes. We're paying for them now." "Paying?" I scoff. "You're inconvenienced. Paying would be taking responsibility, acknowledging the damage you caused. Paying would be understanding that your actions had consequences. Not just for you, but for me." "What do you want us to say?" Mom pleads, her voice cracking. "Tell us what you want us to say and we'll say it. Just please, help us." I look at them, their faces etched with desperation. I see the fear in their eyes, the raw, naked vulnerability. And for a fleeting moment, a flicker of something akin to pity stirs within me. But it's quickly extinguished by the memories, the years of neglect and indifference. "I don't want your apologies," I say. "They're meaningless. I don't want your gratitude. I don't need it. What I want, what I always wanted, was for you to see me, to acknowledge my existence, to value me as much as you valued her." I gesture towards the wall of Amy's photos. "That's all I ever wanted." The silence hangs heavy in the room, punctuated only by Mom's quiet sobs. Dad shifts uncomfortably, unable to meet my gaze. We loved you, Jake," Mom stammers, her voice choked with tears. We didn't know how to show it. You know," I say, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "That's the same excuse you used for never coming to my wrestling matches. You were busy. You didn't know how to cheer. You know, love isn't some complicated equation. It's showing up. It's being there. It's giving a damn. We were proud of you, Jake," Dad says, his voice barely audible. Amy needed us more." The words hang in the air, a confirmation of everything I've always suspected. Amy needed them more. Always. And I, the strong, independent son, could fend for himself. "Thank you," I say, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Thank you for finally admitting what I've known my whole life." I turn to leave, the weight of the past still heavy on my shoulders. "Where are you going, Jake?" Mom asks, her voice laced with panic. "I'm going home," I say, turning back to face them. "To a home I built with my own hands. To a family that actually loves me. To a life that I earned, despite you." I walk out of the house, leaving them behind in the dust and shadows of their shattered dreams. As I drive away, I glance in the rearview mirror, watching the house shrink into the distance. A wave of exhaustion washes over me, the culmination of years of anger and resentment. It's over. The past is finally behind me. I can finally move on, finally build a future free from the ghosts of my childhood. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp September air. The road ahead is clear. My turn. Life settled into a rhythm after that. A good rhythm. Work was booming. The medical center was a resounding success, drawing accolades and new clients from across the state. Sarah was glowing, her belly growing with our soon-to-be son. We spent our evenings poring over baby names and decorating the nursery, transforming our spare room into a haven of soft colors and gentle sounds. The crew was thriving too. I made sure to spread the wealth, giving them raises, bonuses, and opportunities to learn and grow. They deserved it. They were more than just employees. They were my family. I even started to let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I could finally put the past behind me. That the anger and resentment had finally dissipated, leaving room for peace and contentment. Then, one Tuesday morning, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but something about it made my gut clench. I answered it, bracing myself for bad news. "Jake Carter?" A woman's voice, professional and brisk. "Speaking. This is Officer Reynolds from the Willow Creek Police Department. We're trying to locate a relative of Evelyn and Richard Carter." "Are you related?" My heart stopped. Evelyn and Richard. Mom and Dad. The names sounded foreign on a stranger's lips. "I am," I said, my voice tight. "What's happened?" "I'm afraid I have some difficult news, Mr. Carter. Your parents were involved in an accident last night. A single vehicle collision. They didn't make it." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of my desk for support. They were gone. Just like that. No warning, no goodbyes. Just gone. What happened?" I managed to stammer, my mind reeling. It appears they were driving back from out of state. Fatigue may have been a factor. The car veered off the road and struck a tree. "It was pretty severe, Mr. Carter." "I'm sorry." I closed my eyes, fighting back a wave of nausea. They were gone. The people who had shaped my life, for better or for worse, were gone. The people I had hated, resented, and ultimately walked away from were gone. Do you need me to come down there?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We've already contacted the medical examiner," Officer Reynolds said. "We just need to confirm some information, notify any other relatives, and determine their wishes regarding the arrangements." Amy. She was the only other relative. The golden child. The one who had always been their priority. "I have a sister," I said, my voice hollow. "Amy. I can give you her number. That would be helpful, Mr. Carter." "Thank you." I gave her Amy's number, feeling a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching this scene unfold from a distance. "Is there anything else?" I asked, eager to end the call, to escape the suffocating weight of the news. "Just one more thing, Mr. Carter. We found a letter in the car, addressed to you. It appears your parents were trying to reach you. Would you like us to mail it to you, or would you prefer to pick it up? A letter." After all these years, after all the silence, they had finally tried to reach me. And now it was too late. "Mail it to me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Please." "Just mail it to me." I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. They were gone. And now I was left with a letter, a final, unanswered message from the people who had both given me life and nearly destroyed it. The grief, raw and unexpected, welled up inside me, threatening to drown me in its depths. It was a complex, tangled grief, mixed with anger, resentment, and a lingering, unsettling sense of guilt. I stood there, frozen in place, the weight of the news pressing down on me, crushing the fragile peace I had finally managed to build. The past had come back to haunt me, a final, devastating reminder of the broken bonds and unanswered questions that would now forever remain unresolved. The tears started flowing unchecked as I let the waves of grief wash all over me. The baby kicked inside Sarah's stomach, a sharp reminder of what I needed to focus on. I would not drown. I would not succumb. I would keep my eyes open, take a deep breath, and keep swimming forward to my new horizon, even though my legs felt like they were chained to the bottom of the ocean. The letter arrived 3 days later, a small, unassuming envelope with the Willow Creek Police Department's return address. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of its contents, the weight of a lifetime of unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Sarah found me sitting on the back porch, staring at the envelope, unable to bring myself to open it. She sat down beside me, her hand gently resting on my arm. "What is it, Jake?" she asked, her voice soft and concerned. I told her about the phone call, about the accident, about the letter. She listened patiently, her eyes filled with compassion. "You don't have to read it if you don't want to," she said, squeezing my arm gently. "You can throw it away. You don't owe them anything." "I know," I said, my voice hoarse. "But I need to know. I need to know what they wanted to say." Sarah nodded, understanding. She didn't push me, didn't try to dissuade me. She just sat there, offering her silent support. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay inside. I carefully tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter. It was written in my mother's handwriting, shaky and uneven, a stark contrast to her usual meticulous script. "My dearest Jake, if you're reading this, it means we're gone. I'm so sorry, Jake. So sorry for everything, for the mistakes we made, for the pain we caused you. There's no excuse for our behavior, for the way we treated you. We let our obsession with Amy blind us to your needs, to your worth. We were so focused on her achievements, on her happiness, that we failed to see the amazing man you were becoming. We were wrong, Jake. So wrong. And we're so deeply ashamed of the choices we made, especially the choice we made when you needed our help. Choosing Amy's wedding over your life will forever be our greatest regret. We can never take that back, never undo the damage we caused. But please know, Jake, that we never stopped loving you. We just had a terrible way of showing it. We know this letter can't undo the past, can't erase the pain, but we hope it can offer some small measure of closure. We want you to know that we were proud of you, Jake, proud of the man you became, the life you built. You overcame so much, achieved so much, despite our shortcomings. You are strong, resilient, and kind. You have a good heart, Jake. Don't ever lose that. We're leaving everything to you and Amy. The house, what little savings we have left. We hope you can find a way to share it, to heal the rift between you. We know it's a lot to ask, but we believe in you. You have the capacity for forgiveness, for understanding. We hope you can find a way to forgive us, Jake, to forgive yourself. We love you, Jake, always and forever. Mom and Dad, the tears streamed down my face, blurring the words on the page. It was too late. They were gone. And now they were asking for forgiveness, for understanding, for a reconciliation that could never be. I clutched the letter to my chest, feeling the weight of their words, the weight of their regret. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was something. A small measure of closure, a glimmer of understanding. I looked out at the horizon, at the setting sun painting the sky with vibrant colors. The future stretched before me, uncertain and unknown. But I wasn't alone. I had Sarah, my son, my crew. I had a life worth living, a future worth fighting for. I would carry their memory with me, not as a burden, but as a reminder of the mistakes they made, the lessons I learned. I would honor their lives by living my own to the fullest, by loving fiercely, by forgiving freely. And maybe, just maybe, one day, I would find a way to truly forgive, not for them, but for myself. I stood up, taking Sarah's hand. "Let's go inside," I said, my voice stronger now. "Let's go home." We walked into the house together, leaving the setting sun and the ghosts of the past behind us. The future was waiting, and I was ready to face it, with love, with hope, and with a newfound understanding of the complexities of family and the enduring power of forgiveness. My turn to be a father? My turn to make mistakes of my own, but to try and love my children and all the people around me with every fiber of my being. This was my life, and I would live it fully. The funeral was small, intimate. Just Amy, Sarah, a few close friends, and the crew. Amy was a mess, understandably. She cried and wailed, clinging to me for support. I held her, feeling a strange mix of pity and resentment. She had gotten what she always wanted, all of their attention, even in death. The lawyer read the will, confirming what the letter had said. The house, the savings, everything was to be split equally between Amy and me. Amy wanted to sell the house immediately, to liquidate the assets and move on. I didn't care. I told her she could do whatever she wanted. I had no desire to revisit that house, to be surrounded by the ghosts of my past. A few weeks later, Amy called me. She sounded different, subdued. I read the letter, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, I said. I didn't realize, she stammered. I didn't realize how much they hurt you, how much they favored me. It's okay, Amy, I said, surprising myself with my own calmness. It's in the past. There's nothing we can do to change it. I'm sorry, Jake, she said, her voice choked with tears. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, I said again. Let's just try to move forward, okay? For them, for ourselves. We talked for a while longer, tentatively reaching out to each other, trying to bridge the gap that had separated us for so long. It wasn't a miracle reconciliation, but it was a start, a small step towards healing, towards understanding. A year passed. Our son, Nathan, was born, bringing a joy to our lives that I never thought possible. He was perfect, a miniature version of Sarah and me, with his mother's eyes and my stubborn chin. Amy came to visit, bearing gifts and a genuine smile. She held Nathan, her eyes filled with a longing I couldn't quite decipher. He's beautiful, Jake, she said, her voice soft. You're a good father. I'm trying, I said, smiling. It's the most important job I've ever had. Amy started volunteering at a local charity, working with underprivileged children. She seemed to have found a purpose, a way to give back, to make a difference. We still talked occasionally. We weren't best friends, but we were family. We had shared a childhood, a history, a bond that could never be completely broken. I never completely forgave my parents, but I understood them better. I understood their flaws, their insecurities, their misguided attempts at love. And I realized that holding on to the anger and resentment was only hurting myself. I chose to let it go, to forgive, not for them, but for me, to move on, to build a life filled with love, with joy, and with a deep appreciation for the precious gift of family. The medical center continued to thrive. I expanded the business, taking on new projects, creating new opportunities for my crew. I made sure they knew how much I valued them, how much I appreciated their loyalty and hard work. I learned that true family isn't about blood, it's about connection. It's about showing up, being there, giving a damn. It's about supporting each other, lifting each other up, and celebrating each other's successes. And in the end, that's what truly mattered. Not the past, not the pain, but the love, the connection, and the unwavering belief in the power of forgiveness and the enduring strength of the human spirit. I walk towards the nursery, hearing Nathan cry in his sleep. He has a cold, and his little body is shivering even though we have the thermostat turned way up. Sarah is already in the nursery, rocking him and humming softly. I rub her shoulders as I sit down next to her, taking Nathan in my arms. He settles in against my body, his small hand reaching out to grab my finger. We have a special connection, and I will never do anything to damage his trust. I will be the father I wish I had. I am ready for the challenge. It is my turn.